For any series that has 7 mainline entries and countless spin-offs, there are bound to be some duds. However, with Resident Evil, both 5 and 6 were duds that bore little resemblance to the series' iconic horror roots. It seemed as if there was a major change from the detailed and suspenseful survival horror genre to just some mediocre shooters. However, after the abysmal wreck that was Resident Evil 6, the series returned to its roots. Resident Evil 7 came in with an entirely different tone, location, set of enemies, cast of characters, and even a new perspective. And while these changes help bring the series back to its rightful horror throne, is the game still good now that we're not starved for anything horror-related in regards to Resident Evil? Despite the fact that the game came out in 2017, I'm not going to go that deep into spoilers because the game has some good twists and turns throughout that are way more fun to discover on your own rather than just being told them. There's also a major choice about 2/3 of the way through that will decide whether you get the good or bad ending, and I'll let you make that choice on your own. No hints here. So, Resident Evil 7 follows Ethan Winters, a new character to the world of Resident Evil, going to the bayou to rescue his missing wife Mia after getting a message from her after her disappearance 3 years ago. Once he gets there, he frees and then is subsequently attacked by Mia as she has been infected and corrupted by a mysterious disease. He seemingly kills her, then he receives a call from a mysterious woman named Zoe to help, but Mia comes back and cuts off his hand. He later wakes up surrounded by the Baker family, with his hand reattached, literally stapled back on, and finds himself in this weird nuclear family in the midst of an explosion. The Bakers are great characters, terrible people, but really enthralling characters. More on them later, though. Ethan escapes from these ties, but clashes with the family while he tries to escape. However, throughout his journey, he's called again by Zoe, who tells them that she, the entire family, and Mia are all infected by a black mold. This is also what creates the enemies of the molded. However, it's possible for Ethan to create a serum that can save them, and that's the goal going into the rest of the game that you can figure out yourself. As you explore the Baker household, you'll be playing in the traditional Resident Evil fashion, but this time in first person. All the series staples are here: weird keys, herbs to heal, new guns to grab as you progress through the game, all that stuff. But there's also the new item of the chem fluid, which basically acts as the reactants to make first aid, bullets, fuel, and even a new type of enhanced bullets that really pack a punch. Resident Evil 7 holds the mix of horror, action, and puzzle solving that made the earlier entries of the series so great. The structure of this game really breaks down into 3 parts, those being the introduction with a mix of everything, the middle chunk really focusing in on horror, and then the last third of the game being a lot more action and exploration oriented. The pacing with this is great, as the game starts by getting you familiar with its different aspects, both control-wise and thematically, and shows you some scares to set the mood, has you do some action with Jack in a few fights, and then throughout has exploration and finding the way to escape the first house you're in. Then we get into the true horror with more of the Baker's land open to us, and dealing with the more horror-based elements, that being stalked by Margaret and interacting with the mysterious Evelyn. Then, with some time with Lucas and a big boss fight, you enter the third and final act of the game, which focuses more heavily on the story, the combat, and tying things up to their conclusion. While I personally enjoy the middle chunk of the game the most, with it being the most pure horror and weaving you through the Baker's property the whole time, I think the balance struck overall does a great job at appealing to the many different types of Resident Evil fans, unlike the full leaning one way that happened in Resident Evil 5 and 6. One thing that's really refreshing about RE7 is its smaller scale, allowing for a more intimate game overall. It's on a similar scale to the first Resident Evil, taking place almost entirely at just one location, with a big house being the main centerpiece. However, with RE7 being on a slightly smaller scale, it also has a smaller pool of enemies to draw from. Those can be divided into 2 groups: the infected humans like the Bakers and Mia, and the generic enemies of the molded. Diving into the Bakers and Mia, first and foremost there's characters, so there's a lot of time that is spent building them up and showing who they are, and given the nature of their infection, even when they get injured or killed, it's not usually permanent. Whenever you do actually have to fight the Bakers, it's either them hunting you down a la Nemesis, or in a boss fight with their unique styles. Jax is head-on and directly confrontational, but always with something weird in the fray, like chainsaws or a car. Marguerite is a lot less directly confrontational, either patrolling an area looking for you or sending bugs to get you, but in her true boss fight, she is gross and terrifying, and I hate it, and I am moving on because, don't want to look at it. The last of the Bakers that you fight, excluding Evelyn, is Lucas, who doesn't attack you head-on, but with twisted games and puzzles that he makes you play. And it's honestly somewhat of a refreshing change of pace. Then with Mia, she's not always an enemy, but occasionally the infection takes her over, and you have to fight her. This only mainly happens in the beginning, just to add more tension and stakes, though. When it comes to the basic enemies, we've moved past zombies and are introduced to the new molded. They're beings made of / infected by the black mold that's all around the Baker farm. There's a few versions, those being the regular, big arm, crawler, and barfer. Note, those are not the official names, but that's what I call them, because, it's pretty representative of what they do. They're basically a new and more terrifying skin for traditional zombies, with the differences being Big Arm has, well, a big arm that's stronger and can block bullets, crawlers are skinny and fast, and the barfers barf acid at the player and are also a lot more rare, generally being more mini-boss styled. Also there are some friggin' bugs that are annoying, but nothing really crazy. I think the mold are a fun new enemy type that stylistically and thematically fits RE7 more than zombies would have, but I feel like there's more room to grow with them. The range of enemies here isn't on the same level of difficulty, and stylistically, it's not the same as other games which have, basic zombies, but also things like lickers, hunters, paleheads, and also generally some type of plant creature like the Ivies or Drandamos. But I do think they work very well here and are a great new addition to the RE enemy pantheon. And it could be interesting to see how they, increase in one game, but because of the story and stuff, I think it might even be better if you just keep them here to RE7, and, if they do, that does make them more, special in that one way, though. Graphics-wise, this was the first time the RE engine was used, and oh my god, is it gorgeous. I don't know what coding magic the folks over at Capcom did, but it is incredible. The characters all look super realistic, the environments look natural, and like a place you could visit, and the enemies and mold and corpses just look so gross and creepy, and I hate it, but I love it at the same time. Just, so good. And while it occasionally looks a little bit rough at some parts, the new first-person perspective really ends up covering those edges. The new perspective for the series helps show off the new graphics in the best light, and also makes it more terrifying since everyone is talking straight to you as a player, and not just you're watching the characters talk in some cutscene. Resident Evil 7 takes the bio-survival horror gameplay to a drastically new location, Louisiana. But for real, we're in the bayou now. And there's only really two major locations. Those are the Baker's property and the giant crashed boat. And I'm not going to go too deep into the boat because of spoilers, but I gotta say it's a good third act setting. As for the Baker property, it's about 4 large buildings, a decently sized yard, and a bunch of weird, creepy tunnels. Each building has got the Baker that most heavily resides in that building, and you take them all down and go through all them all as you progress through the game. And it helps create a really nice feeling of progression and pacing of you slowly working your way through the family and, getting closer and closer to escaping this place. The decrepit and falling apart buildings also just give such a creepy vibe, especially when pictures of the buildings in prime form can be seen within certain buildings, and they just look like such a far cry from how we see them in the current day. Now, I've been talking about how Resident Evil 7 brings scares back to the series, but is the game still fun? Well, that's a resounding yes. The gameplay is a perfect mix of survival, horror, and action that allows players to go in with different styles. You can continually go head first and gun first and play on the edge of your resources, or you can be a lot more cautious and just try to avoid enemies when at all possible. It has a great balance of action that keeps the game feeling fun and not just having you unbelievably tense and scared the whole time, just kind of on the edge of your seat without enjoying it. As I've been making my way through the many different Resident Evil games, it's been fun seeing how different the games are depending on when they're made. This emphasizes how good and fun Resident Evil 7 is still today, with a new style of horror in the first-person POV focusing much more heavily on the characters in the game rather than just the protagonist and a horde of faceless enemies. I think the success of RE7 has helped usher in this new, fun age of Resident Evil games, and I cannot wait to play the sequel in Resident Evil 8 Village. I definitely recommend playing Resident Evil 7. It is if you're just getting into the series, I think it's a great way to start because, RE2 Remake and RE3 Remake are great, but, it's just pure, it's this and then RE8 are going to be the only parts of this story that are, new. It's all a good jumping in point. So highly recommend it. If you haven't played it, you should play it. If you want to get into Resident Evil, it's a great starting point and just, it's just so fun and it's really cheap. That's a great thing about Resident Evil games is a lot of times they get really cheap, a year or so after release, like $20. So thank you for watching this video. I love talking about Resident Evil, so I'm always glad to do it more. Let me know what you think of Resident Evil 7. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I wonder, do some people kind of dislike the first-person view? Because when I first heard of it and saw it, I was like, is it really going to be as good? But I think the way the game is built helps make it fun around it. But let me know your thoughts on it. Please subscribe if you want to see more content like this, more Resident Evil content, or just, more of my content in general. And so, thank you, and until next time, goodbye.